So much to discuss today, but I really wanted to start off with Spain because when I was first seeing the videos, and we just have a picture here, it's just really, really wild what is going on. And you can actually see the projectiles up here in the air, which I think is just absolutely crazy to see. So you can see this is a very, very tense situation. And that's really kind of the only way to describe this. Initially, yes, it was led by despair and frustration with the government, but there was a lot of chaos here. And it actually looked to me pretty dangerous in some instances because you do have the head of state of the country. And although he is tall, there are things being thrown at him and everything. He did, I think, a marvelous job diffusing the situation on so many different levels, but very much this was a situation where things could have gone south really, really quickly. And what I want to start off with, of course, is that King Felipe is the head of state of Spain. So it makes sense for him to go and visit these sorts of places after these incidents occur. He didn't go the day after, but a couple of days after. So this happened October 29th. He went and visited on November 3rd, I believe it was. So it was a Sunday. And so he left it a couple of days, but there's sort of an interesting thing that happens with these sort of events because people complain that they went too early, and then people will complain if they don't go soon enough. So I want to start off with number one. This is a no-win situation in many ways. You will frustrate someone. You will frustrate someone. But I think in this situation, it was actually particularly good of King Felipe and Queen Letizia to go and visit because if they had left it too long, they look cold, unemotional, and detached. If they go obviously right afterwards, they're still trying to pick up the pieces and figure out what's going on. So this is a very caustic, tense situation. And it has to do with the government's response here. That's where all this frustration, this anger, this crowd came from, was they knew that things were going to get bad potentially, but the people weren't notified of a potential emergency until as the emergency was happening. So about 2 hours into this torrential rainstorm, the people finally got notice that, hey, something bad is going on here. And they're like, yeah, we know. Like, where were you 5 hours ago? But it was one of those things where things are obviously changing in the region, maybe in terms of weather and those sorts of things. And so there was a lot of frustration here. And when it comes to what happened exactly, they call it sort of a danya. It's sort of a massive rainstorm situation that can occur as warm air meets cold air. And a lot of people tie this to climate change and everything. And so at this point, and granted, this is a changing number because I saw a lot of different numbers, but this was from the Associated Press that 218 people have died. However, many, many others are still missing, and no official government tally of the missing has been given to the public as of yet. And this, of course, is cause for more frustration because people are like, hey, do you know what's going on? Do you know where my loved one is? Are you searching for my loved one? But this is a quickly evolving situation, and it seems to be that with the lack of government warning and the failure of the government overall, there's just a massive level of frustration here because an estimated 11 inches of rain fell in a matter of about hours. And in one location, I believe 20 inches of rain fell within about, I think it was, they said 8 hours or so. So you're talking about a massive amount of water. There was a massive level of flooding. And of course, if your vehicle gets flooded, it's unusable. And so a lot of people, as the rain continued to come, were trying to move their vehicles. And a lot of vehicles are in underground parking facilities because there's not a lot of space in a lot of these old European cities. And so there's a lot of concerns that there might be bodies within these areas, and people went to move their cars or their motorcycles or something like that, and the family can't find them. And so there's a lot of course, very much sadness and like wondering what's going on. And there seems to be a government failure here on multiple levels. There seems to be a regional failure of government and a national failure of government. In fact, the Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, is currently blaming some right-wing what does he say? Hard right-wing groups for some of the failures here. But it really seems to be that this is all about government failure on all these levels, and that they couldn't respond quickly enough. It's tough to get things out. There's, I think, a difference between the socialist government there nationally, and there's a more conservative government locally in Valencia. So there's just so much going on and so much failure. And it's one of those things where when a disaster like this happens, if you are not on your A game, if the world is not, you could say, going well or something to that effect, basically everyone knows immediately because everything fails all at once because it wasn't set up to succeed in the first place. So you have this thing where it's just a massive failure for everyone to see. And so even if they could bury their heads in the sand and ignore it for a while, this event laid everything bare. So a decision was made that the prime minister would visit with his and her majesty, King Felipe and Queen Letizia, and they went to Paiporta. And I think this is important because, yes, as a head of state, King Felipe should go, and so should the head of government. So it makes sense. This does happen quite a bit where the royals and whoever is in charge of the government, whether locally or nationally, will go with them to scenes. This is not entirely always the case, but it definitely is something that happens. But because all the ire is directed towards the prime minister and the government, immediately once they arrived, the situation turned, you could honestly say, maybe perhaps a bit violent pretty quickly. And I say violent because mud and rocks were thrown, and a bodyguard of Letizia's, for sure, I think we will see it maybe in the video, definitely had a mark on his forehead and blood dripping down. So he was hit with something in the head. And so this scene was very, very chaotic very quickly. And some in the crowd were even yelling murderers. So this was not good. And it was in a moment. There's always these moments within the reign of the monarch, maybe not all the time, but there is a moment of crisis. How do you manage it? Because this is where you sink or swim. Harry and Meghan, you could argue, always sink. But when it comes to this situation, I don't think King Felipe and Queen Letizia just swam. They flew in this situation. And I know some people are like, but this was so terrible and awful. And of course it is. But what you want in this situation is leadership. You want people to hear the plight. You want people to face the chaos. And that's exactly what King Felipe and Queen Letizia did. This is exactly, I think, how royals should respond because this shows strength. It shows power, but it's a quiet power. They're not coming in with all these sorts of things and everything, but they are quietly walking into the situation. They are hearing the people, listening to their stories while the prime minister flees. There's actually a great cartoon. I'll try to remember to show it to you guys here, where there's actually a crown and there's a little figure peeking out from underneath. And they're like, Prime Minister, it's okay now. You can leave. And it was one of those things where it's the crown was protecting basically the government in this instance. And so many people are anti-monarchists, but I think King Felipe and Queen Letizia changed a lot of people's minds. So one, and we'll go into the longer quote, said that the two of them had balls for standing there and facing the crowds because these were not friendly crowds. And yes, they became friendlier because really the people's ire is not on them. It's on the government, but they do represent it. And so many frustrated people and angry people came up and tried to talk to the king and queen. And they did try a lot to talk to people. Of course, you have a security situation, so you can't let everything totally devolve. And thankfully, King Felipe is very tall, which I think was great in this situation. This might seem very strange, but I think somebody who stands a head above everyone else and who a lot of people are able to see, he is able to see them. They're able to make eye contact. These are fantastic things. That's why I think it's so notable and awesome. And I think they listen to people with empathy and understanding. And they seem to try their best among the chaos to absorb the brunt of the rage. And it's so important. I think, and those responsible, really truly responsible, ran away. And granted, yes, he should have probably left the prime minister because it was a situation that was probably going to get worse if he stayed around. Totally get it. But I think King Felipe and Queen Letizia, they rose to the occasion here. 100% rose to the occasion. So David Rosalind, whose father unfortunately died of a heart attack in reaction to the flooding. So it was one of those things where sort of the chaos and the concern and everything caused a heart attack. He said, really, the anger was not against the king. He was a second consideration because he was with them. Sanchez and Carlos Amazon, the conservative head of Valencia's regional government. I am not a monarchist, but the king and queen showed more balls than our prime minister who ran off. They spoke with the people. Another, this is Nacho Torreblanca, who is the head of the European Council on Foreign Relations in Madrid. I got this from the Times as well. It says the king emerged well from this. He stayed, he listened, and gave explanations in a tough situation. It was evident that the people were not against the king, but the state. With the queen by his side, they came out of this with dignity. Now, I will say there was also some criticism as well because the couple were supposed to actually go to another city, but because of this situation, I'll let me throw up a picture of Queen Letizia here because I remember seeing her and I think she was even more impacted. And I think if you are sort of shorter as well, and she's not like terribly short, but this I think for me, I would not be able to do more after this. If I was in this particular situation, I would have to go. I need like I can't do anymore. This is very, very, I think, emotionally draining. And so here we have a picture of Queen Letizia comforting a woman. King Felipe is right there as well. So you see officers on horseback and everything. Lots of people around. We do have security, but we also have they were allowing as often as possible somebody from the crowd to come in and speak with them. And so it's really a awesome reflection of what royals can do. And I think this is great too, especially for when it comes to Letizia, because I know a lot of people complain, which I don't totally get, that they find her very cold. And she was very emotional in this situation, but she is somebody who doesn't necessarily like to show her emotions too much. And as a ruler, you have this situation that's tough where you need to show the empathy and the emotion, but you can't totally collapse either because then that could be seen as weakness. So I think she did a great job listening. Obviously, her hair here, you can tell. I don't know if it was raining in this particular situation or if it was just because of the mud that her hair seems wet here and everything. So lots of chaos going on for sure. Let me pull up another picture here because I'm sure as a photographer too, this was tough. And I want to show you again, you actually have her bodyguard here. He was hit in the head with something. The blood is dripping down his face and he is with her. They are talking to people. They're trying to keep her safe. And you just have a very, very chaotic situation, like a hugely chaotic. And so it's one of those things where they need to be there. I'm sure like their bodyguards were freaking out, like so concerned because this is definitely a situation where things could go really wrong really quickly. But I think overall, despite their lack of power, what King Felipe showed is what a king is in this modern era. They are beyond the politics. They are the sort of voice and comfort to the people. That is what I think all monarchs, to the best of their ability, should strive to be. They are there in the midst of crisis. They face the brunt of what really should be against the government, but they faced it. And the great thing is, too, is because they are beyond the politics, the king can walk into a room and go, I heard X, Y, and Z stories. What are you going to do about it? Because I'm the head of state. My power is limited, but I get to hold you to account in some ways. And so I'm going to push you to do X, Y, and Z because this is what I'm hearing from people. They faced this challenge head on, which was not easy. We'll see video here in a second. And they did so, I think, without fear and hugged and mourned with the people. I think that is absolutely fantastic. Amazing representation of what royals could be. This again was the test. This was the test I don't think anybody really wants, but sometimes you face and you either sink or swim. King Felipe and Queen Letizia, I would argue they even flew in this. All things considered, this would be very, very hard. So we have a bit of video here, and I want to show you guys because this was very chaotic. You'll notice they have umbrellas. This was to try to shield the king a bit from the mud and other projectiles that were coming their way. And we'll try to watch as much of this as we can, but we will have to pause from time to time for copyright reasons. But let's go ahead and let me make sure I pulled it up. Yes, I did. And we'll make it a little bit bigger here and we'll get into it. So as you can see here, guys, very, very chaotic. I don't think you could say in this instance at all that there wasn't a level of chaos here. A lot of chaos for sure. And so the photographer guys there even focuses in on the guy who was injured because this is, one of those moments. So I don't know quite what they're saying there. If somebody wants to come in on this, if anybody has an idea, feel free to put it in there. There obviously somebody asked, "Oh no, is aid being given?" Yes, it is. It's just I believe slow to get there. But reportedly, at some points they were yelled at and called murderers. Now, obviously, this isn't directed to the king and queen, but the politicians. Again, lots of anger here, lots of frustration, and yes, this is obviously what's driving it, but I mean, I can't really describe it anything else but a bit like a mob. So that is what we're going with. So again, lots of you have the horseback riders here, and this is actually very important. I listened to something a little bit talking about policemen on horseback, which is very important because they get a higher view of things. This is for safety reasons, and obviously somebody could hurt the horses, but it gives them a greater vantage point over the situation. And you can actually see here you can see the mud on his shirt, the mud on his cheek there a bit. So, and mud on the other bodyguards and everything. So, definitely I'm sure not what they were anticipating. This was not what they were anticipating. And but he faced it. You have to give him massive props because the politicians definitely couldn't do it. So you can see King Felipe trying to, calm down, calm down. We hear you. We're here to hear you and listen to you and listen to what's going on. A very sweet moment there for sure between Queen Letizia and one of the women in the crowd. I would say Queen Letizia, I think, looked a bit more frazzled than King Felipe. I don't blame her at all. Just saying she looked a little bit more like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to think about this. But she did do exactly, I think, what she should have done. And that is absolutely fantastic because I don't know if that's necessarily always natural for her. And I think it goes against the idea of her being cold because she's not cold. She's just different in how she approaches things. And you can see a lot of emotion on her face as well. She was wiping away tears there earlier too. And so I think she was really feeling the situation and all the high emotions here. So there again, they're trying to do a little bit of a security corridor, but lots of people, lots of chaos, and trying to hear the people as well. So I think bravo and hats off to their security team as well. I'm sure this was an absolute nightmare for them. I gotta say, I love the hug. The hug is magnificent. Bravo to King Felipe. He did that a couple of times with people. And I think, again, it was that very personal touch that royalty can bring without the burden of, you could say, the state or all the politics, the infighting that mires politics. Obviously, we're in an election right now in the United States. And so our politicians really don't have this ability to do it quite as well because it's all wrapped up in the politics of something too. And yes, the royals obviously they want to portray a good image too, but this goes beyond that. I think this is just being somebody who is there to be the heart of the people. So I like this. Again, you can see how tall Felipe is. You can see actually the corridor of security over here now. And then he's inviting somebody in to come and chat with him.
Déjale que pase, déjale que pase, que pase. Tenemos más cuidado, hemos perdido amigos, cuidado. ¡Antes, perro!
And so here we'll see a bit of what happened with Sanchez. So you can see this is his security team. Understand why he had to flee, but still looks a little cowardly. You're hiding behind the king and the queen here. And I think if an election was held today in Spain, the king and queen might win. So, obviously, you got to cut off a little bit there, but he was very much being escorted back to his car. Lots of things being thrown at him, and I would say he looked a little defeated as well. And I mean, I think it would have made the situation worse if he had stayed, but he also looks pretty bad for leaving. Lots of things going on there, but I just really wanted to show this story because it's so absolutely fantastic. I think how King Felipe and Queen Letizia handled a situation that I think would break some others. I don't know. I can't even think really of another situation where royals were, you could almost say sort of, there was a protest instance where Charles and Camilla were in a car, and that car, things got thrown at it and everything, and they seemed a little spooked by that. But I think this is the first time I've seen really a crowd around royals like this that could turn potentially very bad. So I think they did an excellent job with the situation. And yeah, as Judas Scope Barbecue says, I think they were chanting Ascendo murderer. Yes, that seems to be what they were chanting. And so I think they did, all things considered, a fantastic job. Mad props to King Felipe and Queen Letizia, because I don't know if other royals could have done it, to be quite honest. I don't want to say who I think it would be because I'm actually not sure. But this is a situation where you are thrown into it, and it's a moment. It's a moment whether or not you can handle it or not. And the two of them could, and I think bravo for doing it. This is obviously a situation where the government has to figure out how to let people know better ahead of time when a disaster is coming. This has actually changed part of the coastal line of Spain and Valencia in this region. So this was a massive event, one of the biggest flooding events in quite a while in Europe. And obviously the death toll is already at 200. It'll probably climb higher. And so this is just a huge, massive event for them. And so I think this is how you learn. This is a great, and I think sets a good foundation for the future, because some of the problem King Felipe has had is that his father led the country back into democracy by not accepting the vision for his future that Francisco Franco had after he died. So Juan Carlos is a very revered figure in Spain because of this. And King Felipe, they were very much in a situation where they were liked, but not as liked as his father. His mother is still much beloved. And so they are in this tricky situation where they're not, I would say that the feelings are meh to warm, but they think this is going to turn a lot of people into monarchists. And I think other royals should be, okay, are we ready for this scenario? I don't know when it'll happen. Nobody knows when it'll happen, but are you ready? And I think King Felipe and Queen Letizia were. And I guess apparently, and I haven't seen this, but Maxima and Alexander, King Willem Alexander and Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, were mobbed in South Africa over reparations. They had to flee. And yes, there is a moment to flee. There is a moment to flee. It's too dangerous. You put other people's lives at risk, and that's always something to consider. Depends on the situation and everything like that. And so there are so many considerations here. And so this was something where they had the absolute sort of best response they could. And King Felipe has authorized various military operations to go in and help and everything. But this is a very complicated situation, and it's not really all on them. This is a government failure. And it was so much of everything that's happening. So great to see King Felipe and Queen Letizia out there. And I think showing the world what monarchy really does look like.